welcome back to Exhaust Notes Australia. My name's Dan, and next to me we have the Alfa Romeo Stelvio Quadrifoglio. And for anyone who knows, this is a pretty special SUV from the brand. I'm a big fan of the Giulia, and what Alfa Romeo have done here is basically taken that, stretched its proportions a little bit, given it a practical boot and some all-wheel drive. But the recipe under the bonnet is still the same. We have that amazing Ferrari-engineered 2.9 litre bi-turbo V6. It makes an amazing sound, and of course 375 kilowatts and 600 newton meters of torque. We have some beautiful and very Italian looking 20-inch rims on here, and even though it is an all-wheel drive, we do have a staggered setup of 20 by 9 on the front and 20 by 10s on the rear. We have Pirelli P0 tyres with 255 45s on the front and 285 40s on the back. It's a pretty grippy tyre setup. And of course, being the Quadrifoglio, we do have the 4-leaf clover in the triangle on the sides and the badging throughout. Being an SUV, it has the practicalities, but it doesn't have as much weight. Alfa Romeo engineers, using a lot of aluminium construction, have managed to keep the Stelvio under 2 tons, weighing in at 1,790 kilos. That's pretty good, and it helps with this car's agility. Also boasting a 50-50 weight distribution, with the engine sitting slightly behind the front axle. It all comes together in what is quite a good package, and at $175,000, it kind of wants to be. Among improvements for the 2024 model year, the Stelvio's received the updated headlights, just like the Giulia, which I think are a big improvement over the look of those from the pre-facelift. We can still option up the 21-inch wheels on the Stelvio. Very similar pattern, just slightly different, but I do think the 20s look amazing. You can also option up a sunroof if you like, but standard it doesn't come with it, and I suppose that's going to help with the car's rigidity as it goes along as well. You can also option carbon ceramic brakes if you want, but standard we do have 6-pot calipers up front, cross-drilled rotors. Pretty sure they're 4-pot calipers down the back with a separate caliper for the handbrake. It's already a pretty decent package. Under the hood, of course, is the powerful 2.9 litre bi-turbo V6. It is a work of art in the engine bay, seeing much of the engine and not too much plastic. You obviously got the strut tower braces as well. And yes, those vents in the bonnet are functional. The back of the Stelvio is actually quite roomy. I've got space here, and this isn't even in my seating position, so it would actually be a little bit further forward. It's a bit dark, if anything, just with the dark roof lining, and there is no sunroof to allow extra light in, but you can see that this could be quite comfortable. The leather obviously comes through the back here. We have door pockets, things like that. We have the round air conditioning vents continue back here. We have 2 USB points, and we have a place to put our phones, although unfortunately it is a bit smaller than modern phones today. So you can't actually put your phone in there. Plenty of room for a child seat, as well as a center armrest with 2 cup holders. So overall it's not too bad. It does tick the family boxes, and I've got a fair amount of headspace here, which might not be the same if we have the sunroof installed. We do have an automatic tailgate. You can also have it so it does the whole foot sweep thing if you have it set up that way, but the remote or the button is sufficient. Obviously now you have auto close. You can also lock the car from that as well. Decent boot space in there, a subwoofer, and the ability to lower the rear seats. It's all practical. No spare wheel, unfortunately. It is just a tyre repair kit, but that's pretty common these days, and I don't know if you'd be able to fit a spare one of these in the boot without really encroaching on your boot space. So yeah, I think they've done okay on that. Allow me to give you a brief history lesson. What does Quadrifoglio actually mean? In Italian, it is 4-leaf clover. And why is it on Alfa's top-of-the-line performance models? Well, if we go back to 1923, 101 years ago at the time of recording, a race driver by the name of Ugo Savocci raced in an Alfa Romeo. And he was a bit sick of coming second, so in this particular race he painted a 4-leaf clover in a white square on the side of his car. He went on to win. He was a good friend with Enzo Ferrari, and the two of them helped Alfa Romeo in those early years. Sadly, later in the same year, Stelvio would pass away whilst driving another car that didn't have the 4-leaf clover on the side. Pulling from different sources, the change to a triangle was to have that the 1 point would represent Stelvio, but also other influential drivers that have helped Alfa Romeo's journey through the years. And it now represents the pinnacle of Alfa Romeo's vehicles. It's a nice touch. There endeth the lesson. I'm sure you just want to know how this thing goes. The Alfa Romeo Stelvio is, I suppose, in your mid-size SUV segment. Being a 5-seater, we have 525 litres of boot space. And if you fold down the second row, you can get up to 1,600 litres, which I feel is pretty decent. It's quite comfortable in here, full leather of course. The steering wheel is really nice to hold, has a bit of Alcantara where your 9 and 3 positions are, so you'd have to see how that wears over time. It's very Ferrari inspired with the start-stop button, big red. We have these wonderful aluminium shifters either side that don't go with the steering wheel, but they're big enough that if you're in a turn you can still hold them pretty easily. It's maybe a little basic in here, but everything you need is around and pretty easy to get around. We have knobs and buttons for your air conditioning, which is quite welcomed in this day and age where everything is usually behind a touchscreen. We do have a touchscreen in this 8.8-inch display, but it's nestled within the dashboard. It's not like an iPad that's just been fixed, which again is refreshing. We do have a full digital 12.3-inch instrument cluster now. I believe in the pre-facelift it was very analog, or a combination of the both, and I don't know, I would have liked to have still seen that, but obviously you can get more information this way. You can change the display. You can go from this very basic view to a semi-retro style to a more modern one. I quite like the modern one. It has the rev counter going anti-clockwise motion. Yeah, it just looks a little bit nicer. The fonts and everything change. Of course, there are some little touches when you change your drive modes. You have your DNA Pro in the Quadrifoglio, so that goes from advanced efficiency, which is your A, which is just for your pottering around and not doing much. You have N, which is for natural, or I guess normal. That's your null setting for again, just getting around every day. And then you can go up to D for dynamic, which opens the exhaust valves just a little bit, I think, and gives you a little bit more performance without turning all the safeties off. And for the diehards, you have race. You just need to turn the knob and hold it, and then the exhaust valves open just that little bit more. Everything's off now, and perfect for the track or for attacking some roads. I'm going to leave it in dynamic. In dynamic and race modes, you can also adjust the suspension, which softens up the dampers, but I mean, in reality, your two suspension settings are harsh and bone-shattering. There's no question that regardless of wheel size, even with these 20s and the it's just, you're feeling all the bumps in the road. But the interior is a nice place. Everything's logical. You don't have to use the shifters behind the wheel. You can also use the gear lever and use your up and down, forward to go down a gear, backwards to go up a gear. But I think it's definitely going to feel more natural to use the paddles. The shifts are very quick in race mode, but heck, they're sufficient enough in dynamic as well. Now, the thing about this all-wheel drive system is that it does send most of the power to the rear wheels until it determines that the front wheels need to help out, which is good. It's not going to snap your head off, unlike the Giulia, which is completely rear-wheel drive. It is easy, even in dynamic mode, that if you give it a bit too much in a corner, the rear will lose traction a bit, and so then the front will step in. Such is the way of having 375 kilowatts and 600 newton meters of torque on demand. So of course Alfa Romeo named this car the Stelvio. Stelvio in Italian purely just means land or field, but we would better know it for the famous mountain pass that those three English chaps went to and made famous on that very popular automotive show a few years ago. Stelvio is the highest mountain pass in Italy, so it kind of makes sense to name their SUV after something so grand. And compared to other mountain pass names like Mendola, Podoi, or Splugen, which is one that I got to drive on a few years back, I think Stelvio has the right sounding name for a car. So this is kind of where the Stelvio should be in its element. Twisty, winding roads, nothing too tight, but those fun roads that get you from place to place. It's that family SUV that can do it all with that amazing twin-turbo V6 under the hood. Now, I'm assuming I could trust the gearbox to do these changes for me, but it's just that bit more fun to do it yourself, isn't it? Alright, so the beauty of the Stelvio is that you can come into a windy section of road in race mode, and you've got that added security of the all-wheel drive. So, like, I get it. It just, you just point it into a corner, you know the front wheels are going to grip up if needed. I think if I was coming through here in the Giulia, I'd probably want to stay in dynamic mode. Oh, those noises. Even on these tight corners, just turn in, just don't get on the throttle too early, because it surprisingly is easy to slip these rear wheels even in dynamic mode. Oh, even a crack then. Nice. Oh, wow. With your drive modes, your different screens can come up. What I'd like to have seen there is a little bit more customizability though. When you're in dynamic mode, you get this big G meter up in the middle, and I mean, that's kind of cool and everything, but considering I've been driving mostly in dynamic mode, which might explain the fuel economy problem. Yeah, like if you don't want the G meter there, you can't move things around. So, a few other little quirky things, like just the way the indicator stalk works. Normally with an indicator, you activate it and it will stay in that position until the turn is made, and then on steering it'll deactivate, but this indicator stalk will return to neutral. And then there's the sound of the indicators. It's a bit like a grandfather clock. It's very tick-tock kind of sound, which, yeah, it takes a bit of getting used to. I mean, every car company now is having their own little, sounds these days, you know. So the audio system is a 14 speaker Harman Kardon system, and as you'd expect from that brand, it's pretty damn good. And failing that, if you don't like your stereo, you've got the amazing bi-turbo V6 as well. So yeah, I mean, I've probably listened to the radio the least in this car, because but also, as I've said, as a result, she does like to drink. So for the next thing we'll look at, Alfa Romeo claimed that the Stelvio Quadrifoglio will go from 0 to 100 in 3.8 seconds. We've got a 100 zone just ahead of us, so maybe it's worth seeing how she goes. Maybe we'll try race for this one, just for the full experience. Alright, let's see. I don't know how fast that was, but that was a lot of fun. Alright, hold on. Like I said, it sounds good. It feels good. Alright. I think enough of that, hey? Now, another thing worth noting is that, with all the optional extras, one that I forgot to mention was that, as nice as these leather buckets are, you can actually option up some Sparco carbon fiber bucket seats. You lose some of the electric adjustability, but you know, for those extra bragging rights, and if you've got a few extra dollars burning a hole in your wallet, maybe why not? You also have things like lane departure assist. The steering wheel will vibrate if you get close to the lines on the side of the lane. You have blind spot monitoring so that the mirrors will tell you if there's someone sitting in your blind spot. All those niceties. I think the car gives you enough, although if you're an objective buyer, there will be competitors that will offer that bit more. And so your decision is going to come down to whether you want the features and the technology and that sort of thing, or if you're following your heart and you want this engine, this setup, this experience, which may not be around for too much longer. For some, that could be a really easy decision to make, and for others, it might be a really difficult one to get past the wife or whoever you need to convince. And so after all that, blasting up and down roads and just having a good time and using this car as it was intended, it can wear its other hat, where it just settles it all down and is almost a perfectly compliant SUV for around town. I say almost because to be properly compliant, you need to have it in either the advanced efficiency or the natural modes. Just find the brakes are that little bit more twitchy in dynamic mode. You can't really get a smooth stop. And there's the other thing, a performance SUV like this has stop start function. You can turn it off, but you have to turn it off every time you turn the car back on again. Now, the interior, I think I mentioned previously, it is nice. They've updated this carbon weave for the 24 model. It was a bit more shiny in the previous one. It's got some texture to it now. We have cup holders and things around. We did note that the front cup holders aren't massive, so if you've got huge bottles, they may not fit, but I'm sure it's going to take most other things pretty well. But everything's laid out really nicely. All of your dials and everything are in good positions, easy enough to use. We have this rather small-ish screen here for your infotainment, but it does the job well. It's maybe just a little bit laggy, and I'm just going to say it's certainly behind most competitors these days, but that's kind of not why you're getting the car at the end of the day as well. So there's that too. For competitors, I guess you're up there with your Macan GTS, your Jaguar F-Pace SVR, things like that. It's probably a BMW, Audi or Mercedes that will also fit the bill. But I truly think that anyone who's buying a Stelvio Quadrifoglio is just buying it because they know the brand, they respect the history, they probably don't care too much about the competition. They just want the Alfa badge. And what a beautiful SUV it is. There's one thing that Alfas have been renowned for, is that it is their styling, and you know, we definitely have that here. Now, not that anyone's going to care too much, but fuel figures. The claimed figure is, I believe, 10.2, and combined is 13 or so. Yeah, that latter number, even that is wishful thinking. We're in the 14s here, and of course it's just going to depend on your right foot and which drive mode you like to use too much. I suppose that explains it, and you know, you pay to play, as it were. But what a car to play in. Look, it took some getting used to from day one, and I think I've settled into it now after having spent some time with it. It's certainly not a car for everyone, and the Quadrifoglio definitely isn't for everyone, and that's why there is the Stelvio TI and the Stelvio Veloce trims, and they are almost half the price. You can start off at about 85,000 for those. But what you're really paying for, of course, is that engine up front and what it offers you. You know, if you just want an SUV that will do the family things, there are plenty of other options available, starting with the lower spec Stelvios, and you know, I could probably name drop a few others as well. But as I said, it's not the point of this. This car is for pure driver experience, much like the Giulia. But for what this is, a practical family car with a massive boot, it can do the shopping, it can do the school run. Certainly my daughter's been the coolest kid at school for this thing. But then you've seen, we can have a blast on some pretty nice roads as well. So on that, I do feel that Stelvio again earns its name based on the highest mountain pass in Italy, and made famous by those three English guys. We know why. It's the kind of roads it was designed for. Come back to some of the other boring things. We do have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. It is a wired connection, and I've found it's through the rear USB port, not the front one. Didn't work for me. We do have a wireless charging pad here. Depending on the size of your phone, the connection can be a bit intermittent, and when it detects a phone in there, that affects your screen. So yeah, it will flash up that it's detected a device for charging. It's like, yeah, I know, I'll put it in there, but then it will forget it's in there, and then it will remind you, and yeah, it's just a bit touch and go with that. But everything else in the car is fine. The air conditioning has been great the whole time. We've had, well, it's been quite cold in Sydney recently, so we haven't actually needed the air conditioning too much, but it's done its job. We are missing out on some of the other creature comforts. We don't have a heads-up display. I think a panoramic sunroof should be included at this price, but again, based on the kind of car it is, I think the reason they've left it out is clear. It would affect the car's performance slightly. It would also add weight. And on the note of paying to play, Alfa do back this with their 5-year warranty, and well, I'm going to say it's capped price servicing. The service intervals are 15,000 Ks or annually, but those visits to the Alfa dealer are going to cost you anywhere between $900 and $2,600. So be prepared for that. I think it's the 4-year service is the biggie. I'm not sure what they're checking for that one, but you know, I suppose with the kind of mechanics that this thing is running, you're going to have to expect to pay a little bit. I'm sure you're still coming in under anything a proper Ferrari would be costing. And there is another thing to be said for the Stelvio and the Giulia, that these could be the last of their generation, the last of their kind with the move to electrification. We already have the Junior coming on, which is fully electric. So this sort of car, if you're thinking about it and you want something that's this visceral and just proper driver experience, then get on it now, because they may not be around for much longer. I'm sure Alfa aren't selling these in massive numbers anyway, so once they're gone, they'll be gone. It's a sign of the times, but it's also a bit of a shame. But on that note, I guess a big thank you to Alfa Romeo for letting me have a play in this vehicle and to experience it. If it is the last of its kind, then at least I've had a go. A big thanks to you for watching and subscribing. Hit the like button if you like this video. We've got plenty more coming, of course. And a big thanks, of course, to Exhaust Notes Australia for letting me review the car for all of you. It's been fun. So I've got a bit longer with this, so let's enjoy these moments, but I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay safe.